good to be with you this morning. It is good to worship with you in this beautiful worship center led by this amazing music ministry, led through liturgy and joined in this credible network of Baptist leaders from all over, who, by the way, also happen to be Reverend Carrie's best friends. It is an honor to stand in this pulpit, to preach in this pulpit, though this pulpit itself has changed over the years, and though the preacher's preference for actually standing behind the pulpit has changed over the years, I can't help but recognize that every preacher who stands in this holy place is standing on holy ground and on the shoulders of some pretty big giants in our tradition. Folks like Bob Hearn and Hardy Clemens, like John Claypool and Charlie Johnson, like Philip Wise and Ryan Price, and like Jake Maxwell and then Charlie Johnson round two. Each of these preachers offering their own gifts and shaping, each in their own way, the strong legacy of Second B. And friends, it is strong. But I would be remiss not to name that the strength of this community isn't all about your preachers. I'm sorry, Carrie. Though everybody knows how important proclamation is in this place, the real strength that you have is really a deep bench of leaders, both ordained and lay, led recently by Reverend Tim Lyles during your interim. Where is Tim? I expected him to be sitting right over here, but that's Tommy, another member of your deep bench. There are numerous others who should be named, but I'm only supposed to take 15 minutes, so we need to move on. But suffice it to say that I know how special this church is, and I know how special this pulpit is, and I'm honored to be able to stand in it for the next several minutes. So thank you, Second Baptist, and thank you, Reverend Carrie. I bet there are some overachievers in this room who've already read all the way through the bulletin and already read the sermon title and already made up your mind that the one courageous woman about whom I'm going to spend the next several minutes talking about is Reverend Carrie. I mean, y'all have met Carrie. You've gotten to know her now. You know that she is darn courageous. Oh, let's remember she did leave behind decades-long friendships developed on the East Coast to move out here 5 hours past, everything. All to follow the call of God. A call that led her to you, this beautiful, beloved community of Jesus followers. But even though she may be led by the call of God to come out here, it still takes a healthy measure of courage to make that big change, to take that huge leap, to move herself more than 1,000 miles away from everything she had ever known to call home, to answer the call of God to come here and to lead in this way, such as to be called the first called senior pastor, who also happens to be a woman, but standing on the shoulders of another female minister who had the title of senior pastor, the Reverend Stephanie Nash. But to take on this calling, to pick up this mantle, to take on this title in a time such as this, to borrow that phrase from the book of Esther, a time when our politics are so toxic that everything is divisive and controversial. Man, that is one courageous woman. Thank you. So I'm sure that my overachievers just knew when you read the sermon title today that we were going to talk about Reverend Carrie Veal. We could, but we're not. Because there's another woman that I want us to talk about today. In Mark chapter 5, we meet this courageous woman. And if we had read the entire narrative, verses 21 through 43, we would see that the woman actually interrupts another story that is unfolding in Mark's gospel. You see, Jairus, a religious leader who has a 12-year-old daughter who's become ill, Jairus went to Jesus and begged him to come to his house and heal his little girl before it was too late. And when you're reading the whole narrative from start to finish, you can already feel the urgency of Jairus' situation when the woman, our courageous woman, enters the scene. You see, her entrance is bold and quick while the crowd is pressing in on Jesus as he hurries on his way to Jairus' house. The woman pushes herself through the crowd, reaches out her hand, and touches Jesus' cloak. And in so doing, she claims the healing for herself. Y'all, she didn't even ask for permission. I don't know about you, but I don't think I would have had the courage to do that. I don't think I would have been bold enough to push my way through the crowd and just take what I needed, not asking for permission, not waiting in line, not respecting the process. And what about Jairus with his 12-year-old daughter back home? I mean, the woman's action put that healing on pause. Because when she touched Jesus' cloak, Jesus could feel the healing power leave his body. It left him and it went into her. "Who touched me?" Jesus said. I don't know about you, but if I were that woman, if I would have touched Jesus, causing him to stop dead in his tracks, to turn around as the crowd pressed in on him and to call me out, y'all, I'm a redhead, but my face would have been both beet red and dead white all at the same time. Everybody would have been looking at me, wondering what I would have done. But this woman, our courageous woman, the text says that though she was afraid, she didn't run the other direction. No, Mark says that she came forward in her fear and trembling. She fell at Jesus' feet and she told the whole truth. I just wonder where she came up with the courage to do that. I wonder if it's because when you suffer in the way that this woman suffered for 12 long years, the same number of years that Jairus' daughter had been alive. Let's not bypass that little detail there. When you suffer that long, sometimes I think you just stop caring what everybody else thinks. You know, everybody else had probably already made up their minds anyway about her. They'd already given her all kinds of nicknames. Unclean, unwelcome, uninvited, line skipper, cheat, maybe even criminal after today's antics. That is, you know, if a civil offense like pushing to the front of the line warrants that scarlet C for the rest of one's life. I mean, even in our Christian tradition, we don't know her name. We only know her illness. We call her the hemorrhaging woman. But she didn't seem to care. And y'all, that takes a lot of courage. For a woman in her day, a woman of her stature, a woman in her condition, outcast, unclean, marginalized, a woman bearing all those other names, to reach up, to reach out, to touch Jesus' robe and to claim the healing that she needed. That is one courageous woman. You know, even though we came here today to talk about one courageous woman, the Spirit has reminded me this week of something that I really don't think about that often. As I prayed and read and studied the story, and as I thought about all of you and Carrie and the story that is being built here, I had this strange memory that the church is also feminine. The church is also feminine, not just the building, but also the people and the community. The living church is a she. And friends, it's biblical in the sense that the New Testament authors call the church the bride of Christ. And it's also very traditional when you think about the names of those great European cathedrals, Notre Dame, our woman. And it's also very grammatical, as I remembered this week, as my own 12-year-old daughter studied her French lesson and was perplexed at how all the nouns have genders. Why is that table feminine, and why are these scissors masculine? I don't know, they just are. But friends, church in French, Spanish, and German is feminine. And if the church is feminine, and if these stories from our Gospels are truly inspired to speak to us in many different ways, then I have to wonder if our hemorrhaging, courageous woman might be interpreted as a metaphor for Christians and the Christian church today. I mean, let's think about it just for a second. Haven't we been broken and sick for a while? Haven't we tried everything we know to try to heal our fellowship, and yet found out all our efforts fall short? I don't think I even need to cite examples. I mean, we're all aware of how Christians are behaving and speaking to one another in public, right? Our National Christian Fellowship is looking a little sick, a little broken, a little fractured. And because all of that, the story about this woman makes me just wonder if we too might need to summon a little courage. Courage to push ourselves through a crowd. Courage to step outside of convention just a little bit. Courage to do something bold, like reach up and touch the cloak of Jesus. I mean, I wonder, would we even be courageous enough to get that close to Jesus in the first place? I mean, people might talk if we did. And then I think about Jairus. You know, Jairus probably did not appreciate this woman very much. People like him, and if we're honest, people like us, people like Jairus, with all his righteous prestige, his proximity to power, his status which afforded him the privilege to approach Jesus in the first place. You know, sometimes when we read these texts, we don't pay attention to the power dynamics, but they are there. And there is a real difference between Jairus and this woman. Jairus has access to Jesus, and the woman has to push for it and reach for it and claim it for herself. And people like Jairus, which is to say people like us, don't tend to appreciate it when others cut in line. And with everything that Jairus had on the line, I can't really blame him. This was his daughter's life. You know, I wish that the ancient disciples, when they were following Jesus around Galilee, I wish that they carried iPhones with them like we do, because then this whole thing would be on YouTube and we could just pull it up and look at Jairus' face. Because I can tell you what my face would have said if my mouth didn't say it first. Sometimes I extrovert a little too much. But I can tell you what I would be feeling if I was standing in Jairus' shoes on that day. But here's the thing. You and I and Jairus, we worry about our resources running out. Like we worry in those moments about Jesus not having enough healing power for all of us. We worry about the woman taking what we already thought was ours, snatching it up right from under our feet, jumping in line, stealing something that belonged to us, and once it's gone, we actually think it's gone, as if Jesus' healing is like some kind of limited pie where when all the pieces are served out, it's gone. But friends, I'm here to tell you, Jesus doesn't work like that. His healing is an inexhaustible resource. It is one that just keeps on flowing. His love will never be stolen out from under us by someone else that we have labeled as an outsider, unworthy, illegal, unfit, criminal, heathen, or any other dehumanizing word that we might use to describe our neighbors whose real only name is beloved child of God. In fact, sometimes I wonder, or maybe it's more than that. I think I would argue that the reason Mark puts these two stories together in this way, with that one courageous woman interrupting Jesus, Jairus, and the status quo, I would argue the reason that Mark put her story right in the middle of the other one is because Mark is trying to teach us that if we want to be healed, if any one of us wants to truly be healed from all that plagues our souls, our Christian fellowship, our toxic politics, our broken society, our global community, if we want to ever be healed and whole again, we've got to stop believing that healing is an individual experience. We've got to stop believing that healing is an individual experience, and we've got to start living like we know that my healing is bound up in your healing, which is bound up in Carrie's healing, which is bound up in Vicky's healing, which is bound up in Tim's healing, which is bound up in Eli's healing, which is bound up in Bobby's healing, which is bound up in Kim's healing, and y'all, it goes on and on and on as the circle expands, and all of God's children are healed and loved and whole again. And this brings me to my very last point. Y'all say that your mission statement is love all now. And so I suspect you already know how important that middle word is. And I suspect you also already know that it isn't easy and that it will require you, if you take it seriously, to set aside all the little bits of Jairus that live within you in order to make space for that courageous woman, whoever she may be. We've got to make space for that courageous woman who shows up and reaches up their hand, desperate for healing. And I also suspect that you already know that people aren't going to like it. People are going to talk, and people might even call your church some names that you don't like. But if you really mean what you say, then I know with God's help, the good people of the Second Baptist Church of Lubbock, Texas, you will heal the world with love. And by the way, in case you didn't know, you've got one courageous woman leading the way. And for that I say, thanks be to God. May it be so. Amen.